what is it called? TED Talks? Thanks for watching my Mule Deer TED Talk. Here we go. Down now, brown cow. Oh, that was a fun one. Went down a little too much of a rabbit hole. I wanted to rant, but then I lost my train of thought. I had a good one for that one.
You start from the top.
I'm just gonna start from the top. Well, here we are, and as you can see by my hat, it's getting to be that late season rifle hunting time frame, so I actually stole this hat out of the podcast room, figures it works out for this video at hand right now. But we just did a Q&A on Instagram where you guys could drop questions about mule deer hunting this time of year. So wrote all the questions down, and to kind of keep myself on track, I did write myself a bunch of notes. I'm probably gonna be referencing my computer screen. That way I don't get super long-winded and make this like a 50-minute video. Well, let's dive into it. Good old mule deer Q&A. All right, this question: how long do you stay in an area before moving to find deer? Unfortunately, sometimes you gotta go by with your gut. Like, what are you feeling like the terrain holds? Does it feel like there's gonna be bucks in there? Feel like there potentially could be bucks moving that you're not seeing? Can you move around, glass from different angles? Well, most of the time when I'm in an area, if I'm not seeing deer, I really like to go by the strategy of giving it a morning and giving it an evening. Usually mornings are gonna be best because mornings are gonna be cooler, a lot more deer moving around. Sometimes those evenings, I've killed a lot of bucks in the evenings too. Locate a lot of bucks in the evenings. You might want to move around and utilize glassing from different vantage points. So if you have one big area you're trying to look at, whether it's in a mountain terrain, whether this is some sagebrush coulee type terrain or middle elevation area, just try to find other glassing spots, try to move around during that middle of the day. So maybe glass in the morning, maybe figure out a different angle you can glass, look at different mountain aspects, look at different that coulee country aspects, just try to get different vantage points on that terrain. And that way it's going to put yourself in an area to find bucks that maybe are hidden from your vantage point. I think a lot of people just pigeonhole themselves in glassing in one spot all day. I've done it before too. Sometimes that can be effective, but potentially moving around, and that way you can just feel out if there is or isn't a deer. And like I said, do go by your gut. If you feel like there could be a big deer in that area, maybe leave it for a couple days, maybe come back. But it's kind of just going to depend on how you feel, what the weather is. If it's really hot out, maybe you want to give it more extra days, because maybe there is some bucks in there that are just moving at night and not moving, during daylight hours. So beyond the glass, early morning as possible, and then stay as late as possible too. What makes someone consistently successful during that October time frame? October mule deer hunting is all about patience and the mental game. You're going to do your due diligence, picking out your glassing spots ahead of time, e-scouting, even during the field, picking out exactly where you're going to be glassing, and you want to be mentally strong to hunt that area as early as possible throughout the whole entire day. It's easy to get frustrated during those October time frames, but if you just have that mental strength and patience to glass all day with your binos, glass in the middle of the day with your spotting scope. I do a lot of glassing in October with my spotting scope, whether it's through my BTX, which is really nice because I can look through two eyes into the spotting scope, so I have better less eye fatigue in a sense. But if you have to, I use my ATX a lot too, just kind of zooming in on the terrain, glassing all those shadows, moving around, just trying to be patient and knowing the bucks are probably there. They're probably in some of those timber fringe areas. They're not going to be walking out in the open because a buck doesn't really feel safe anymore. They've shed their velvet. They're not moving around as much. They've been fat and eating well all summer, and now it's kind of that lull period. You're gonna want to find places in the afternoon. That's gonna get shade first. So a lot of times that's gonna be your east-facing slopes. So a lot of times in the evening, I'm gonna switch over and start glassing those east-facing slopes because those are areas that are gonna get shade first. There's potential then to cool off a little bit quicker, and you might see a lot of bucks moving around. Obviously, they might come from a different aspect and kind of move into those east-facing slopes. So just trying to again, just hunt hard, knowing that you utilize your optics, glass all that thick, nasty terrain. I always talk about I like to hunt the thickest, nastiest terrain in the month of October, and a lot of times that pays off. But also don't overlook, looking at other different terrain types. You don't have to go steep, deep, and nasty during October, but just being patient. Realize bucks are there. Get different vantage points again. Don't be afraid to move. Find different finger ridges. Kill a lot of deer just simply moving down, lower into a finger ridge and glassing into the shade pocket, and boom, there was a buck just walking around middle of the day, like in the shade. So find those little hidden shade pockets, and I think you'll find a lot of bucks in October. What are some common mistakes made by hunters during a late season hunt? I think the biggest one for this is not covering enough country on a late season hunt. A lot of times, these bucks this time of year, they're moving around, You don't know where they're at. They could be in any elevation, depending on snow, depending on migration, that sort of thing. So you really want to cover everything you can. Don't be afraid to get in a vehicle, get in a side-by-side, move around, locate areas you can glass from. Obviously, though, you want to try to get away from roads, because what are all the hunters doing as well? They're probably doing something very similar. So try to think outside the box, try to think of areas other people aren't going to glass into. Long distance glassing is going to be key. Another big thing I don't believe, or common mistakes I think people make, is not hunting all day during these late season hunts. These late season hunts, you're dealing with snow, you're dealing with cold temperatures, low visibility a lot of times, and it's very, very easy when you have a wall tent camp, maybe your hotel, maybe your truck's nearby, to leave after 10 a.m., go down to your truck, go to your camp, make a fire at camp, hang out there all day, and then go back out hunting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I feel like a lot of those bucks get up during the middle of the day. I've seen it all the time where I hunt all day, all of a sudden glassing an area, and boom, I see a buck get up to stretch his legs, and then it's game on. And maybe he's getting up to check a doe, maybe there's some does in the area, or maybe he's getting up to move around. So I think hunting all day is going to be key in the late season, because you never know when you're going to locate a buck. People also assume on the late season hunts you need to hunt lower elevations. Trail and Lorenzo give me a hard time all the time about this, but I like to start high and work my way low, because to me, I've killed a lot of bucks in high elevation areas in those late season hunts, because whether it's warm weather, keeping those deer high, they have all the nutritional requirements to stay high, so why would they kind of drop down low? Maybe there's still does up high, so don't be afraid to go higher. Start early in the hunt when your legs are fresh, your body is able to go, you're not mentally drained yet from hunting. Start high and then figure out what sort of elevation bands those mule deer are going to be at, and then you can kind of hone in those places and start kind of work lower as the hunt goes on. But don't just assume you have to be hunting these public-private fringes on the late season hunt. A lot of times these big bucks, they don't want to come down. They know when they come down, but they're going to deal with. They're going to deal with ATVs, truck traffic. They're going to deal with people. So a lot of times they'll stage a little bit higher than you think. They don't really migrate all the time when snow hits. Some deer migrate for random reasons when there's no snow, just depending on what area you're at. So move a lot, glass a lot, hunt all day. Utilize your truck if you need to glass a bunch of stuff. You can glass from your truck as well, but just know that late season hunts, covering country is going to be great. You want to be able to glass big country and try to figure out where those bucks are at, and also try to figure out where the does are at too. And how does mule deer behavior change from month to month during the season? That August time frame, everyone knows that's usually your archery hunt, so bucks are sort of lazy in that they feed for longer periods of time. They're trying to basically gorge themselves on groceries. You can think of it as they're doing two different things during that time of year. One, they're trying to eat a lot, growing some antlers, so they're putting a lot of nutritional requirements in growing antlers, but they also have to eat a lot then too to gain body fat for coming up for the fall and then coming up for the rut. They're up all day. The sun really doesn't bother them as much. A lot of times you can see bucks bedding in the sun, hanging out in the open till, I've seen big giant deer feed all morning until 11:30 a.m. before they finally take their first bed. So they're really, really, really visible in that time of year. Once they strip their velvet though, they get a little squirrely. They start dropping down in some of those elevations. They're going to hang out in those timber areas more, so then you have to start changing your habits and how you're going to be glassing and how you're hunting depending on the season. And also too, once that usually mid to late September, a lot of that high elevation feed starts to get burnt off in the sunlight constantly. There's less and less rainstorms, and so deer have to obviously migrate down because of the browse and things like that they're going for. All the forbs are going to be kind of burnt up. So as they move into October, we talked before, those heavily timbered areas are going to start going into a lot of thicker brush country the bucks are going to be hiding into, so you have to adjust your strategy that way. And then obviously during later in November, that's when the rut is, so their behavior changes a lot then. It might be a little bit more visible. They're going to be chasing does. You're going to see a lot more of those younger bucks out in the open all the time. Those bigger bucks are still kind of being on that fringe edge habitat, kind of not being in the open the whole time. They're still going to utilize a lot of the shadows constantly and not want to be in the open. So you just kind of have to realize, hey, even though it's a rut, even though deer should be moving around, bucks should be visible, maybe there's snow on the ground, still probably be glassing into some of the timber stuff. So just think of it as what are the basic needs of a mule deer. They need feed, cover, and water. And so a lot of times a big buck can utilize that cover pretty heavily, but just know as those, the seasons move on, think of it as like an upside down river. You have a big giant basins where all these mountain ranges, where do they all kind of come down into? Deer are going to start moving down into a valley, basically to a river, a reversed river basically. The headwaters, think of it down below, all the open valleyed braided river sections at the top of the mountains where they're going to kind of move down into. So you can kind of think of it that way for where the path of least resistance for a deer to want to migrate down out of the mountains into the transition zones and into the winter range areas. So just got to adjust your strategy as the season moves on. Where to start looking for deer pre-rut. So again, a lot of that pre-rut stuff is going to be, that late October. Usually, a lot of stuff I've read, you can start getting some rut activity, pre-rut activity around that like October 20th time frame. Usually, a lot of these western states. I'm not talking about like the extreme desert stuff, like Arizona, places in New Mexico, that sort of thing. That first part of November, ruts can start kicking off all the way through the month of November. So you want to focus on places that bucks will kind of move into. So if it's a big mountain area, think of those transition areas. Think of those staging areas where we're going to want to do is a little bit lower elevation. Sometimes that could be 6,000 to 9,000 feet is like a good transition zone, but also you have that dark timber, pine, aspen area that bucks can utilize too. That's like usually 7,000, 11,500 feet. You basically want to find places that does also like to hang out in. So you want to start utilizing some of those pre-rut tactics. Find the does. You might be able to find some of the bucks, but again, a lot of times you're going to find a lot of the smaller bucks. Because we all know how biology works. You have these little teenagers running around trying to chase does when the does aren't ready. Where those big bucks are going to be? Well, they're going to probably be hanging out a little bit higher elevation, maybe a little bit more in the timber. So if you see a lot of bucks, there's young, a bunch of does, just look on those fringe areas around there and you might be able to pick up a big buck. But just scour that terrain and look every single place. Dream mule deer tag. Wow. This is kind of a tough one to answer. I have had one dream tag before in a state I used to live into. It's the best mule deer tag in that state, and I ended up eating my tag. Just one of those, you get high expectations, start holding out for a big giant. I didn't get a lot of time to actually hunt it back in the day because when GOHUNT was starting. So I have had one dream tag in my life, ate that tag. I would say, in terms of other tags I haven't drawn yet, I would really love probably to have a kaibab late rifle tag. I think that's just a dream area. I mean, everyone knows about it. I'm not really blowing up anything. Everyone knows about the kaibab. If you don't, well, I guess now you do. But it's just a super phenomenal area. You need a lot of points, or you have to get kind of lucky. I think I'm going to just wait my time out for that one. That's why my strategy in a lot of different states is burn points as often as I can. Other states, I'm just going to hold off. Muzzy tag, probably here in my home state of Nevada, in one of the premium units. I'd be happy with the rifle tag as well, but a muzzy's going to open the door for getting in the field, and then we have open sight muzzy in Nevada, so a lot of people I think are nervous about picking up a muzzle loader. Definitely, in Utah, Henry's, you got the ponds. Probably one of the premium late season migration hunts in Wyoming would be a great dream tag for me, and then maybe some of those really late third or fourth season hunts in Colorado would be absolutely phenomenal. So fingers crossed, eventually I'll get lucky on some of these. Some of these other options, I'm just not willing to carry the points for it. Top 3 features you look for in late season mule deer habitat. For me, it's always distance from roads. Yes, you can kill big giant deer near a road, but late season stuff, I'm trying to get away from roads if possible. Like I said, I know some of the other early questions, I'm also going to utilize roads to glass from. I want vantage points where I can see a lot of different terrain types. I want to see, oak brush, I want to see sagebrush, I want to see bitter brush. I want to put glass into some pines, glass in some aspens, try to figure out all those different elevation types, try to figure out where those bucks are going to be. Checking out those transition zones, gamble oak, mountain shrub, ponderosa pine, mountain mahoganies. I'm going to be looking at all that areas. Some areas that really excite me though, when I see pines mixed with aspens, mixed with in a close proximity of sagebrush, if I get all those things together in a late season mule deer hunt in terms of habitat, I will really try to key in on that area and try to figure out how I can glass into it. Because a lot of times I feel like those bucks are going to be somewhere mixed in, that sort of habitat, that sort of elevation. So I'll try to, hone in on that. But again, you're still trying to play into those core components of mule deer. What do they need? They need cover, they need feed, and they need water. And I feel like cover is one of the biggest ones for big old mature bucks. Places I will avoid though, a lot of times if that terrain is too open, if it looks too good, yes, you can kill a deer in open sagebrush terrain, but a lot of times those probably going to be some high point units with very low tag holders, or some places that are really open. A buck might move through there in early morning or late evening, but middle of the day, you're probably not going to find a big buck hanging out in the open. Chances of him slipping up and going to that open is pretty slim. So I'm going to again focus on fringe habitats, timber, trying to glass into that, trying to get high above, looking down, hope for snow, that sort of thing. So I have areas where all this terrain that I mentioned meets and I get a big snowfall, boom, game on in the late season. That really excites me a lot. Do you ever still hunt dark timber? And if so, what is your strategy? So this is something I've always wanted to do. I don't get to do it too often because a lot of times I do have a camera guy with, and having a camera guy with, that's just double the noise. But I have actually killed one of the 200-inch deer that I killed during a late season rifle hunt. I actually still hunted, and I shot that deer standing up as I was still hunting through a bunch of aspens. It wasn't a true dark timber still hunt per se. It was an area mixed with pines and aspens. But in the morning, I actually glassed up this buck from I think it was 2 or 2.5 miles away, really far away. Just saw a big giant frame. I saw the habitat he was moving into. He moved into this big aspen patch. I noted the aspen patch on my map. I actually hiked all the way around, kind of set up in an ambush situation for a while. The buck wasn't showing, so middle of the afternoon, getting towards evening, I was like, he's got to be on his feet by now. Still wasn't seeing him. So what I did was I got into the timber. I cut the tracks from the morning. I started going super slow through there. My tactics for this and strategy is obviously going super slow. I was crawling through those aspens, going as slow as I can. Had my rifle scope, cranked way down the lowest power. I had my binos always at the ready. I was using probably my binos more than I was walking. Take a couple steps, pull the binos out, and just kept glassing in front of me, trying to locate any sort of movement I would see. I wanted to be able to see a deer before they saw me. Finally, I started sneaking down through there, started finding more tracks. I found out where they were bedding, kept going down. They ended up feeding down through the aspens, and finally I located a doe. And then I could pull my binos up, looked a little bit more further around, or a little more deeper into the aspens, and I actually saw the giant buck. And he was actually sniffing the air, trying to scent check one of the does. And that's one of the coolest things I've ever remembered. Seeing a big giant deer, just methodically going super slow, glassing as you're hiking through. But still hunting is something I'm not the best at. Even though I have killed a deer doing it, it's something I think is very, very effective. Because what do we all have nowadays? I mean, we all have high quality optics. We all have great rangefinders. We all have great rifle scopes. We have great shooting rifles. Great system built, there's great bullets out there, great cartridges. The thing that can set you apart from all those people who are really good at glassing, really good at shooting, is getting in the timber and still hunting. Because like I said, a lot of these bucks aren't moving around in a lot of these seasons, especially during these seasons now. They're getting hotter and hotter. They're not getting as cold. So jumping in the timber and still hunting could be a great thing. Something that I still want to do more of. So I won't say I'm an expert by any means. Probably got really lucky killing that deer, but it was one of those hunts where it was kind of hot, kind of some snow, and made it work. But it's kind of strategy I would do. Slow, methodical, glass all the time, and just cover everything with your optic before you try to move around. Late October, early November, what is your main focus for finding mature mule deer? Again, it might seem very simple, very over explained by me, but I still search out those nasty places that I feel a big buck, is going to feel safe. So I want steep terrain. I want farthest from road I can. I want those barrier to entries. I want places that are hard to glass, but I also want places that people just don't think a mule deer is kind of going to live in. Those places that are off the beaten path, places that are, like I said, hard to hike through. Maybe it's a big nasty burn. You have to go through a nasty blowdown section. Barriers of entry. Killed a lot of big deer just by utilizing water crossings. A lot of people don't want to cross streams. They don't want to cross rivers. I've carried waders in some places before to cross a river and dumped my waders on the other side, went and hiked in. So just think of areas that are, again, hard to get to. That's going to be a big thing. And that same sort of terrain, again, like I mentioned before, sagebrush, bitterbrush, pinyon juniper zones I'm hunting. Try to find those aspens, pines, where all that stuff mixes. And that's kind of like the terrain focus when I'm doing it. Glassing big country again, figuring out what type of elevation band those deer are at, and then modifying my hunt from there. If I see a bunch of deer at 8,000 feet and I'm at 10,000, damn right I'm going to be, getting it a little bit lower, figuring out how to, get into that terrain, even if it's hiking there or maybe hiking all the way out, getting my truck, relocating all around, coming in. And also just realizing that a lot of times during those late season hunts, a lot of this information is based on biology. I harp all the time on reading biology-based reports. We'll probably get into some of these other questions later. But so much information you can learn on winter range habitat, seasonal movements of mule deer during October and November, and what types of feed and habitat, which type of aspects they like to hang out in, what sort of temperature makes deer move more, like all those things you can learn based on biology. And this one thing I had written down here, which I want to make sure I mention. There's a mule deer study I read Based on numerous mule deer studies, a vast majority of mule deer utilize that pinyon juniper, big sagebrush, and bitterbrush on their winter ranges. So you can kind of utilize that sort of information to your advantage, along with using GOHUNT maps, turning on some of those migration layers in some of those states, overlaying that public land on top of those migration layers. That way you can figure out, okay, if I'm a public land hunter, I need places I can hunt on public land, but where do those migration layers kind of land on that public land? And those are some places I want to key in on, especially if it has some of those terrain features we talked about, aspens, maybe some pine mixed in some of those stuff too. Like, those are the places I want to key in on, and I can kind of utilize that ahead of time during e-scouting. And obviously once you get to the field, you modify things, but just finding places to glass, finding big country, and finding places that you can get away from roads, get away from people, whether that's backpacking in a late season hunt in the snow, or it's setting up a base camp and hiking really far during the day and then coming back in the dark every single day. So just trying to get away from pressure, get away from people. Convince me as an elk hunter to start applying / hunting for mule deer. If you want to stay an elk hunter, by all means stay an elk hunter. But if you want to expand your season in a sense, or set yourself up for future hunting opportunities, you might as well be applying to try to hunt, or applying for future years to give yourself a chance to actually hunt mule deer. Take me, for example, on the opposite spectrum. So I hunt mule deer every single year. It's my main focus, is trying to put mule deer tags in my pocket. What I've also done is set myself up to draw elk tags in a lot of western states. And I have gone on some elk hunts, some over the counter, some easy to draw stuff, but I do have a lot of points built up for what I would consider premium dream elk hunts. So eventually it's gonna look like I'm a really good elk hunter, but it's just that I have a lot of points for every single western state, and I'm getting close to wanting to knock those off, or trying to knock those off and burn my points so I can start over again. So you can do the same thing as an elk hunter. You can keep elk hunting every single year, try to draw those easy draw tags. Maybe you have some that take 3 or 4 points, but at the same time you can be applying for mule deer every year, and eventually you're gonna have enough points in that state to draw a mule deer tag. Maybe you're elk hunting in an area, you see a big deer. Well, you look how many points it might take. You already have those points built up. Next year you could potentially, depending on draw odds, depending on point creep, depending on all that stuff, or what the draw system is, hunt mule deer in that unit, and that way you have the freshest intel. So I think it's worthwhile to apply for everything that you can afford in a hunt, or in an application season. So if you have the money, you might as well start to build points in certain mule deer states. A lot of mule deer states make sense to apply in. Some of them probably are total long shot, but do yourself a favor, put some points in your pocket. That way in future years, when maybe you want to become a mule deer hunter, you have the opportunity to be a mule deer hunter. How do you change tactics for hunting more desert country for mule deer? So desert country is definitely some of the most, in my opinion, more difficult terrain to hunt. I mean, yeah, if you have some early season tag and it's really dry, you're gonna be seeing water sources, that sort of thing, so it can be potentially a little bit easier depending on what season you have, or again, the temperatures. But I'm hunting desert bucks. I do the same sort of thing I do on a mountain hunt compared to that sagebrush country. I'm looking for difficult terrain, places people aren't gonna access. A lot of the desert places I've hunted has a lot of road systems. So I'm trying to pick areas apart that look like, yeah, they might have a road going through it, but maybe there's a steep hill right next to it. That's gonna be, again, that barrier of entry for people. So I might try to find a little hidden pocket that doesn't have a ton of roads going around it. There's not gonna be a road up higher. Maybe there's just one road down below. I'm gonna hike, around, trying to get in the high points of it and try to glass down to that desert areas. And sometimes it can be just as easy as literally hiking a half mile from an ATV or a main road and some of that desert stuff. I mean, desert stuff is harsh. Everything wants to try to basically kill you. Everything has thorns on it. Rocks are sharp. So a lot of people just don't like hiking around and moving through the desert terrain. Definitely want to look for water sources. I try to mark every single water source in the desert area ahead of time. Yeah, the bucks might not be like, quote unquote, going to water during the day, but you can hunt near there and kind of use that as a baseline for, is there water in that area? Is it the cover? And do they have to feed again? And if they have all those 3 things, and you have a little bit of remoteness, find an area with a little bit less roads, you can try to put yourself up in a spot for success. Obviously, glass is going to be huge in desert. I love trying to find little high points in a desert terrain and just glass a metric ton of country and just overlook everything. Again, just figure out where are these deer, and maybe I'm just seeing small bucks, but maybe then I'll see a small buck way off in the distance, move around a little bit, get on a little higher point near there, and maybe some of those bigger bucks and some of those little washes, some of those little draws, that sort of thing. So just trying to utilize the desert terrain to your advantage, trying to figure out what type of habitat it has in there that would hold deer, and try to key in on that. Do you let a buck sit there and die slowly, or try and go get another arrow into him? So I'll use an example for myself. I shot a giant deer back in 2015 with my bow, ended up giving him 27 hours until I went in to look for him. Figured I'd give as much time as possible, there's no rush. Shot him in the middle of the day, big storm was coming in. I did see him run down the mountain, he was bleeding, basically hit him just behind his last rib cage, hit him kind of far back, and bedded in some trees, and I elected to not stalk him. Well, turns out, if you saw that film, went back in there, gridded it for 3 days, never located that buck. So if I could do it over again in that situation, again, it's probably situational dependent, I probably would say go in there, stalk it, and try to get another arrow into him. I think we all try to do whatever we can do to make the best to figure out what's the best situation for that moment of time. And like I said, if I could do it again, I probably would have stalked it again. If you're a rifle hunter, I think it's a little bit easier. If you hit an animal, you shoot again. I don't care what rifle you're shooting, what cartridge, what bullet. You hit an animal, you shoot it again. And people are going to give other people shit for that, for, oh, you took 3 shots on an animal to knock it down. Well, then you've never been hunting before. Hunting isn't sunshine and roses. It's you float on that gray line all the time where, yeah, you might have made a great shot, but still standing there, you should shoot again. So with a rifle, I always feel like you put another round in and you make the next best shot possible, or you try to get closer, make another shot on the animal, but do whatever you can to make that animal not suffer. We owe it to ourselves to put that animal down as quick as possible. We always strive for one-shot kills in hunting, but it doesn't always happen that way, no matter if it's 100 yards with a rifle, or 500 yards with a rifle, or 20 yards with a bow, or 60 yards with a bow. Make the best shot possible. If it doesn't work out, reload, take another shot. Or again, like in this situation, do you wait it out and try to stalk it that same day? I think that's just depending on the situation, how you feel about it. If you give it a couple hours, maybe stalk it with the bow. So, have you ever rattled in a mule deer in November? Or not worth the time? So I actually have tried to do this. So I was going to college. There's this little area around there where there's a bunch of bucks always in November. So I was like, what the heck? I'm going to go up there and try to rattle. I was fresh coming off of, living in Minnesota. Obviously whitetails, obviously we rattle bucks in. So I took a little rattle bag up, tried to rattle, doesn't do anything. Never had any luck with it. It's not that I tried it once, I tried it multiple times. I don't have a very large sample size, but these bucks were in the rut, and they were with does, and it was on public land. And tried doing it, didn't have, like I said, didn't have much luck doing it. So it might work well in certain situations, but again, I just don't feel like on a mule deer, rattling for me just hasn't worked. I only tried it that one time. But one thing I will say, and I'm not sure if my friends are going to get mad at me for mentioning this, but one really good tactic is you can call in bucks using a fawn in distress call. So basically what that's going to do, you have some areas where there's some does in the area, or you think there's some does, you don't know if there's a buck bedded in the timber behind there, you can use a fawn in distress call. A lot of times they'll call in some of those does, and then what's going to happen when you call in some of those does? Well, if it is in the rut and all of a sudden that buck that is bedded down in the timber that you don't know about sees those does leaving, what's that buck going to do? The buck's just going to, follow that doe. So you can potentially call in a buck using a fawn distress, and I have utilized that tactic before. I usually do carry a fawn distress call on some of those late season hunts, just in case nothing's going right. I might just bust out a fawn distress and see what kind of reaction I can get out of the deer. It's not going to work every time, just like any calling tactic, but something you can try during the rut to try to pull that doe in, which then will pull a buck in that might be behind it. So give that a try. How far should you camp from your planned glassing spot, or can you camp right on it? All right, so this one's definitely going to seem a little out of the ordinary and maybe a little different from the norm, but depending, again, it's all situational based. I feel like you can camp really close to the exact area you're going to glass and the exact area you're going to hunt. Case being, I killed a 204-inch deer roughly 200 yards from my camp. So we're camping in this area multiple days. It was a late season hunt. We had a teepee, we had a stove. We were cutting wood every evening, but I was trying to keep noise to a minimum level. And then on whatever it was, the 4th or 5th day, literally 200 yards away from my camp, there was a big giant canyon. And I set up right there and then shot the buck at 480 yards down into that canyon. It was a 204-inch deer in the snow. So we were camping really close to it. Obviously, trying to camp near those areas, you're going to want to be aware of where those thermals are, how they're going to drop down in the mountains, so they're going to swirl down in a canyon, spook everything out. But you can camp close as long as you keep, again, noise to a minimum level. Like I've talked multiple times before, usually when you have a camp, you have wood, like a wood burning stove, you're doing chores in the evening, If you get back, it's dark out. Usually your voices start to get louder and louder because you're just talking casually with your buddy. And so you gotta know to just stop doing that. Keep your voices low. Don't try to, talk really loud when you're in your camp because again, if it's really cold out, those really cold evenings, that sound's gonna carry. And then again, just be mindful where you're camping for wind every single day so you don't, blow the basin out. But you can camp really close to bucks. And obviously, you might want to, if possible, get, half a mile away, but if need be, you can glass or camp and then just glass right off that spot and you'll be totally fine. Tips for glassing bucks in October. There's a big trend on all these October things for rifle reason. I'm gonna keep this one simple. Slow down, work the timber. If hunting lower, try to find elevation to glass into the PJs or brush. It's basically, again, try to find that thick, nasty stuff and try to glass into it, no matter what elevation you're at. Work all the angles, like we mentioned before. Move around a basin, glass into it, glass middle of the day, glass in the shadows, use your spotting scope, and then again, work the finger ridges. I think I mentioned earlier, how kill the buck in October, then glass them up, start working down this finger ridge. There's a big shadow area on an east-facing slope. Well, the buck was up in the middle of the afternoon feeding, and I just basically sat down and shot him right from there. So working those finger ridges paid off on an October hunt, just figuring out where that shadow is going to be, and then hunting that shadow line. BTX versus 15 SLCs for 1 to 2 mile glassing in open country. Easiest, simplest way I can put this, BTX all day. If you can carry 15 SLCs, you can carry a BTX. Yeah, they're going to be heavier, but it's a workhorse. 15s crush on the mountain, and you can sit down. Obviously, both of them are sitting there glassing with 2 eyes, but I feel like a BTX is just built for open country glassing, especially those extended distances, and I will pack that weight because I've said it a lot. The 2 things that are most important on a hunt, besides for hunting skills and all that stuff, is you got to find the animals to kill the animals, and you got to have a weapon to kill an animal. So if you can't find them, you can't kill them. So pack the big optics and utilize those for big open country. What are your top 3 tips for a new mule deer hunter looking at October to late season rifle? All right, I got this broken down in 3 bullet points. See if I can just do 3 bullet points and not ramble on afterwards. Get comfortable backpacking in the snow. Understand that's more of a mental game and it's not going to be an easy hunt, whether it's October or November. Find places that you can hunt a lot of different habitat types or areas where you can look at a lot of different mountain aspects. So you want places, get the north-facing slope, I want a northeast-facing slope, I want to find some east-facing, maybe some west-facing, maybe some south. You might have to move around, try to get those aspects, but those would be my top 3 tips, and also we'll throw a 4th one in there. Pack a bunch of different optics, utilize your optics, glass all day, glass with a spotting scope all day, glass with your binos, everything you can to try to glass into all that terrain. Top 3 mule deer hunting books. Well, it just so happens I have those 3 books sitting right here. I'm not big on hunting-based books. I have pretty much every single mule deer book that has ever been published, whether it's hunting-based, biology-based. I literally own them all. You can just search all the different places and try to buy them. Anytime I see a book that I haven't read before, I buy it. I like things that are rooted in science. I do feel like if you want to be an effective mule deer hunter or effective elk hunter, antelope hunter, bear hunter, read stuff that's going to benefit you in the field by learning about the animal you're going to be hunting. There's definitely still a lot of value in hunting tactics, glassing tactics, how to move around the terrain, all that sort of stuff. So those are really good. I'm not going to say they're not good, but I like reading biology books. A lot of these books are very dense. You definitely want to have a lot of energy when you read them. You don't want to be reading them late at night. You'll probably fall asleep, but you can piece a lot of stuff together. There's so much good information, all this stuff about biology, habitat, feed, migration, that's all rooted in a bunch of these biology books and biology type report. So the 3 books I have here, this first one, Mule Deer Handbook for Utah Hunters and Landowners by Dennis Austin. It's a really good book. It's just, obviously it's really based on Utah, but a lot of stuff can apply in other states. A lot of studies here that were done across state lines, but it just talks a lot about biology, movements of deer, concerns for deer, trends on different units, that sort of thing. Very, very good book. I've read this book so many times. I have a bunch of highlight stuff in here, a bunch of pages full of it. As you can see right here, look at deer-elk relationships. I have a bunch of lines or words underlined, starred, everything like that. I write in all my books, make notes, put sticky notes in there. This is definitely a book I would highly suggest everyone to read. And then want to get into the really dense stuff, Mule Deer and Black-tailed Deer of North America. This is basically an encyclopedia on mule deer, a bunch of studies across a ton of different states. It's a really good book, a lot of information. As you can see here, I got a bunch of little sticky notes up on top and a bunch of words and notes written in there. Then newest book, Half a Finger, love you. He's an awesome guy. He compiled this book, Ecology and Management of Blacktail and Mule Deer of North America. It's another one of those really dense books, but a ton of good information in there. Yeah, these books are expensive, but I feel like you will get a lot of really good information about this. And again, everything, you know, I love reading biology-based stuff about those areas. You're not going to find a lot of information exactly like, hey, I'm hunting Wyoming, I hunt this certain area, is there a study on it, is there habitat analyzed about what mule deer eat in that unit or how they're migrating? Probably not, but you can find something generalized about the state or about the trainer reading, and then utilize that on your hunt. And then always to make this one long-winded, I wrote an article on GOHUNT about how to use Google Scholar to try to find more information about peer-reviewed, science-based reports. So I use Google Scholar all the time. I pay for a lot of different PDF documents I want, try to find them for free if I can, but I will read a lot of those PDF documents, and Google Scholar is the way to do it. So if you're going to read some hunting books, again, I talked about I don't read them all the time. I'd rather spend more time reading this and trying to learn this information, but some of the best books, you know, you got a bunch of David Long's books. He has 2 books out there. Robbie Denning, amazing dude, super talented hunter, super smart when it comes to conveying his words in a written form. The guy's killed a lot of giant deer. He has a lot of tactics about how to glass, how to hunt. So Robbie Denning's book, David Long book, those are 2 of the classics. I mean, both of them have 2 different books published. So those 4 books that those guys have published would be definitely some ones to check out. Are desert mule deer harder to kill than high country muleys? 100%, I think so. I don't hunt a ton of desert stuff. Living in the desert here, I've been, you know, slowly hunting more desert stuff every single year, and I will say, without a doubt, desert hunting is a lot harder. It's hotter, it's usually thicker, the terrain's not as conducive to glassing. You get to utilize different tactics. You have to start tracking, dry tracking, try to find big bucks. I think it's just overall harder to kill a desert buck, but a lot of times there is some giant deer in the desert units. So if you have deserts near you, desert units, I would say definitely try to hunt them, but it's going to take a lot longer to learn them and try to figure out how to crack the code. Best early October tactics to find bucks: high 70s, low 80 temperatures. First of all, are we hunting the exact same place? Because it sure sounds like it. I got one of those tags coming up, and I'm going to be in the same boat as this. Just got some bullet points written down. So this is how I'm modifying my strategy. So I've been scouting a little bit recently. Temperatures are really high. I haven't seen a lot of big bucks moving around. I'm seeing a few does, seeing some smaller bucks. But to me, terrain still feels like there's got to be a big buck somewhere in that area. So I'm still going to kind of focus on some of that. I'm actually moving into areas right now, because now we're getting into the rifle hunts, where I think other people might push bucks into. So I'm still glassing, I'm still getting some vantage points where I can glass a lot of terrain, but I'm also figuring out, based on my scouting, based on where I've seen other people, is where are people going to be in this rifle hunt, where are they most likely going to be hunting, where are they most likely probably going to be glassing from, and are they going to be pressuring deer and pushing them into some other areas. So I'm trying to hunt some of these like little escape routes, kind of fringe areas where I think deer might pile into, and I'm trying to figure out places that I think people are overlooking. Kind of changed my tactic up for this spot, and hunting a little bit differently than I would if it was a little bit cooler out, where I could do a lot more, you know, big glass work during the middle of the day. So I'm just kind of modifying my hunt based on the temperatures. Not going to be a lot of deer moving in the middle of the day. I barely saw any deer activity in the evenings. Obviously concentrating a lot on my glassing every single middle of the day, and then I'm going to try to work in some of these other areas where I think people might be kicking deer around as they're leaving for their hunts, because it's going to be so hot during the middle of the day. I'm going to stay up there all day. The other week when I was up there, I was literally sweating the entire day. So I'm going to stay up there all day, and hopefully when people leave some of these glassing areas, they're going to walk through a bunch of habitat that might kick out some deer that they don't know is there, and hopefully they'll be set up in a spot where those deer will kind of move into, and I'll be able to glass them up and locate them, and then maybe move in and try to take one of those bucks. Definitely working the brush with optics again. Getting my spot well before sunrise is going to be key, because again, I want to establish that I'm hunting there, because there's going to be a lot of other hunters in the area, and then staying as late as possible. I have no problem staying, you know, going 5 miles in and then hiking all the way out if I need to move areas in the dark. Just, you know, be there as early as I can, stay as late as possible. And then trying to be really mobile with my camp. Basically doing like one of those like bivvy style elk hunts, carrying my camp on me every single day, no matter where I end up camping there. That way I don't have to waste a bunch of time moving around if need be. The season is when the season is, so you gotta hunt when it's hot out, unfortunately. So that's gonna be my strategy right now during October with those high heat. If money was no option, what would be the one upgrade I would make to my truck? Not just get a new one. So as most people have seen, my truck is beat up, it's old, it still runs. I save money by not buying a new truck. There is one thing I would do for my truck right now, and again, it might seem silly. I would get a little topper for my truck. That way I can store gear a lot easier. Right now, when I go on all of these hunts, you got chains, you got shovels, you got hijack lifts, you got, extra jackets, extra tools, all that stuff to try to repair things. You have hunting gear, you have coolers, you have gas cans. If I had a topper, it would make things a lot easier because right now I have to transport all my stuff in the back, and then as I get to my hunt, I put it all in my cab. So it's all locked in there, but getting a topper would open the door to making things a little bit easier. So that's the one thing I really wish I have. So if I get a new truck eventually, I will probably get a topper, or if I decide to keep this truck for maybe 3-4 more years, I'm probably gonna get a topper maybe this year or next year. I'm just trying to decide what I should do for that. So getting a topper, I think, is gonna be key for being the ultimate truck for mule deer hunting. Given the options for the rest of your life, hunt mule deer and lose a leg, or hunt elk. If you know me, you know the answer already. I will 100% give up one of my legs to be a mule deer hunter the rest of my life. I'll put it at that. I can definitely find a way to get a prosthetic leg and make it work. I will hunt mule deer for the rest of my life. I would rather do that than hunt elk. So, easy answer. What is your ideal glassing distance? This guy says he runs 10x or 12x binos and a mini spotter for reference. I feel like you could be really dangerous glassing with that setup at 1.5 miles an in. Really, really dangerous at glassing. I've measured recently, I may do it every time I'm on the field too, all the distances of the canyons I'm glassing, the basins I'm looking at, or wherever I'm at. That distance and in, you can be really effective with 12s, you can be really effective with a mini spotter. The reason I went on, I did have 12s and I actually had a mini spotter. And those distances and in, I was able to see a lot of details with my 12s. Obviously at that 1.5 mile range, it's getting a little bit further, but you can still see deer moving in and out of some of the habitat types. And then if you have that mini spotter, I can bust that mini spotter out and glass all day if I need to, and try to pick apart some of those long distances. So you can still get it done. You can still do a lot of that detailed work with both the 12s and the mini spotter. You can probably glass up to 2 miles, but you start to get that fringe area where you need some good light to try to glass really far away. So I would just try to, maybe set up in that 1.5 mile an in range for those type of binos in spotter. I'm going to kind of combine these two questions. So this question is, do you ever hunt lowland, badlands, less glassable terrain for deer? And how do you locate deer? And the other question is, goes with that, just tell Brady to check his DMs from me. So I will apologize first off. I do try to get back to all the DMs. I do get a lot of DMs. If you catch me in a good time, I'm really easy to answer said DMs. But I just looked at this guy's DM who told me to check his DMs, and actually relates to this Badlands, open coulee country, sagebrush country type of hunts. And the easy answer for that, find the brush, north-facing slopes, look at northeast-facing slopes, look at east-facing slopes, and that's where it is. I hunt a lot of that terrain. It's just finding the brush, finding those deep little cuts, deep little canyons that you actually can glass into, and then usually there is going to be deer there. If I see brush in a lot of that open country, I get excited because I know it's probably deer. A lot of times, if you're in a late season hunt, you're going to have to glass in the wind. A lot of times you get that north and northwest facing slopes, so obviously I'm going to utilize that terrain on some of those east, northeast facing sides, so actually it's going to be protection from the wind, because all those open country deer, they hate the wind and that sort of thing. But this guy was basically asking me the guy said, answers DMs. He wanted to sum up what is the big difference between high country deer and the deer that we have here based on that Badlands stuff, and what resources are available to learn more about those areas' mule deer populations. And he said elevations like 2,000, 2,500 feet, so it's totally different stuff. And I actually pulled up, again, Google Scholar. So I want to talk about Google Scholar again for a second. So I pulled up Google Scholar. I typed in mule deer movement in North Dakota, for example, because I tried to pick out some of that Badlands type stuff. And boom, the second one on the list, it's a PDF. It's mule deer habitat use in North Dakota Badlands. So I pulled that up right here, and it's written by William Jensen. It's a big little biology report. Down below on the bottom, it talks about habitat types. It talks about vegetation they're utilizing. And it even has this little graphic here about opportunistic feeding areas and bedding locations, and then telemetry locations, feeding and bedding. And it's basically this graphic here in table 3, if you guys look this up. This is from a 1992 report, percent opportunistic and telemetry locations of summer adult doe habitat use for feeding and bedding. So in percentage of slope aspect, for this type of terrain, it says northerly slope aspect, 57% of the time, there's, these does are feeding in there, and 72% of the time, they're bedding in those north-facing slopes. And the telemetry locations actually had on deer, 73% was in the north aspect, and 85.7% was in the bedding areas. And you can get the breakdown of south-facing and east-facing slopes for all that. And there's a ton of information in some of these PDF documents about what habitat to focus on. And if you read some of these, like I said, that's just a gold mine of information right there, telling you to focus on north-facing slopes for that type of terrain, because that basic percent I just listed off was where the deer were found. So that's why utilizing science-based biology reports, peer-reviewed, published papers, books like these that are in front of me, is going to be essential to try and find mule deer depending on the state you're in. So that's what I would tell you. Utilize these papers, read them word for word, print them off, highlight them. They're a gold mine of information. Right there I just explained how to find deer in those areas, and it goes on even deeper of where those deer were at and what type of habitats they were preferring in basically the Badlands of North Dakota. Peak rut or pre-rut for mule deer, if you had the choice, I would hunt the peak rut 100% of the time. A lot of times some of those season dates might be a little shorter. You might have weather impact, but I want to be able to hunt big bucks on their feet. Basically, you get more chances for a big mature buck to slip up when you're hunting the rut. They're going to move. It's going to be colder out. They have to move to feed. You have snow on top of that. They have to, again, move around because of the snow. Typically, there's less tags giving out on those premium rut dates, so less competition. And again, colder temps, deer need to be on their feet more. Snow is a high possibility in a late season hunt, so it's also going to be easier to glass. So I would take a rut hunt all the time over a pre-rut hunt. All right, Arizona Strip, Henry Mountains. You get one tag, any weapon, any season. Which one are you taking? I'm taking Henry Mountains. So less tags, first of all, than hunting the Strip on the Henrys. Obviously, both have giant deer. I would love to hunt the Strip. I would love to hunt the Henrys. But for me, terrain is going to be probably the biggest reason why I would choose Henrys over the Strip. If I only get one choice, I feel like it's going to be a little bit easier for me to hunt it solo. I have a lot of friends who hunt the Strip. I know a lot of guides who run the Strip. I feel like you need a team to hunt the Strip effectively, especially those big giant deer. You can be hunting multiple days without ever seeing a giant deer. Obviously, if you could, scout every single day and live down there and have it honed in and maybe hire a guide, I feel like the Strip's gonna be better. But I feel like for a do-it-yourself person like myself, obviously if I drew the Henrys, I bet I'd have a good group of friends want to go up and try to help. Same thing with the Strip, but I feel like I could get it done a little bit easier on a Henry's tag rather than a Strip tag. I'm sure a lot of people might argue the opposite of that, but that's just my feeling right now. Henrys will be easier to glass. A little bit easier to hunt for big mature deer than the Strip. I think we're gonna wrap it up after this question. This one's gonna be a little in depth. So this one, what food should I focus on for a late September, late October hunt? What face are they located on? All right, we'll jump into a little summer, fall food source habitat thing. So summer months mule deer are mainly on that forb diet, and I've read in a bunch of these studies that 85% of the mule deer's diet during the summer is gonna come from forbs. Those are like, dandelions, bluebells, lupine, clovers, any sort of broadleaf vegetation. Obviously there's gonna be some willow habitat in there, sweet clover. A lot of those are finding those like high elevation type habitats. And obviously there's a giant list of forbs below. That's just a quick run through. Fall, as late summer hits, a lot of those flowering plants that mule deer like to eat in the summer months are drying out. So now they're gonna begin to switch their diet to mainly that browse / shrub type vegetation. So you can think of serviceberry, mountain mahogany, bitterbrush, chokecherry, elderberry. Again, that's going to be some of those like north-facing slopes, bottom of draws, that sort of thing. Some of those west-facing slopes are going to have a lot of that. A lot of the east-facing stuff is going to have that as well. And then you can also think too, once the fall kind of transition, some of those late fall time, that's going to be some of more like the winter browse. So they're going to be migrating out of the mountains in the wintering areas. There's still areas you can find them in that late October throughout November. So deer are going to start switching to mainly browse that time of year. All those other vegetation types are either burnt away, covered in snow now. So now you're talking anything with leaves and twigs. So sagebrush, bitterbrush again, mountain mahogany, cliff rose, rabbit's brush, scrub oak, serviceberry, juniper, and even willow, and obviously I mentioned sagebrush. But one thing I did want to mention here too, I can't remember exactly what research study this was. This is a little note I wrote to myself on my phone a while ago when I was reading one of these books. Should have noted it down. That's key if you're going to write things down. Right where to reference it so you can go back and read it. I just want to read this right here. It's been studied that when snow depths exceed about 12 inches, this will cause a mule deer's diet to approach 90% browse. So again, you can utilize that to your advantage. So if you get a big snowfall or without a bunch of snow on the ground, you can expect to find deer where the browse habitat is. And then snow depths exceeding 20 inches, the browse will be 99% of a mule deer's diet. So again, that's why I always harp on science-based reports and try to figure out all this habitat, feed, what a mule deer eat during the day, how they live during the day, like utilize this information, because that's where this is going to be key. And again, we talked about a lot before about taking your phone out taking pictures of all the habitat you see mule they're feeding on. Then once you get back to service, reference that. You can tap that little eye on the iPhone. I did have someone respond to me before that there is a feature on Android phones very similar to that, where you can look up certain plants, certain trees, certain vegetation types to figure out exactly what that mule deer was, and then you can kind of look for that later in some of your visual boots on the ground scouting. A lot of times too, you can possibly find some of those vegetation types too on e-scouting. All right, so that is a little wrap up. I know I got very long-winded. That was probably a crazy long video. There's still a lot more questions left. But just want to say thanks for all these awesome questions. Hopefully some of these answers help you guys out. I know I could go in depth on a lot more of them. This is kind of a quick run through. Appreciate you checking it out. If you have other topics for Q&A, whether it's late season hunting, late season elk hunting, gear choices, rifle choices, you know, we can get trail on here talking about bow stuff, or transitioning to other seasons, or even, you know, prepping for next year. Let us know. Happy to do more of these Q&As. We'll probably do another one on these because there's still a lot more questions left. So appreciate y'all. Thanks for checking out. Got any questions, again, drop them in the comments below. And best of luck if you got an October mule deer tag, or if you're lucky enough to have one of those special November mule deer tags in your pocket. Wish you luck, and make sure to send